Third part. Here they come. Cray grinned. "You're looking pretty happy about this," said Dust. "Damn straight. Fakes or not, none of these clans are like the nobility, and they won't use their ranged weapons in chameleon suits. To show off their immortality, they'll come at us freaking barehanded. That suits me just fine. Look after the woman and the kid, okay? You're feeling pretty full of yourself. Hey, leave this to me." A slender gleam appeared in Cray's right hand. It was the same dead man's blade that even Dee had wanted to see. Would it now demonstrate whether its reputation was deserved? "But it's daytime. How can they be out in the sunlight?" Vera asked. "Hold that thought. I'll catch one and ask him for you," Cray replied cheerfully, stepping forward. Dressed in white, the mountain folk advanced on him as if they were wading through oncoming surf. Weathered by the sun, yet deathly pale, their faces were those of ghosts. Their lips alone were strangely crimson, and the stark incisors that peeked from them were those of the nobility, the fangs of a vampire. Noble and pseudo-noble alike suffered from a hunger that would not be sated for all eternity. Having spotted 4 victims with warm blood in their veins, they had saliva dripping from the corners of their mouths, and their teeth gnashed as they reached out their hands and dashed toward Cray. "Mr. Cray!" Marie cried out to him. Cray had expected as much. "Relax. Nothing to worry about here. No, I was just going to ask you not to kill too many people." "You little dope. We're dealing with lackeys of the nobility. On top of that, they mean to make us like them. It's kill or be killed. But they're human beings. They were human beings, dummy. I don't think it's very nice to go around calling people stupid at the drop of a hat." Cray had to desperately fight the urge to scream. "I'm about to unleash hell with my knife to protect this squirt," he thought. Something whooshed past his cheek. One of his foes' arrows. Son of a... Bracing himself low, he prepared to jump. Up ahead of him, the men in white tumbled backward, one after another. They had to be 20 or 30 feet away at most. Gnarled fingers clawed the air with eternal curses, and bright blood spilled from mouths vainly opening and closing. The white snow beneath their fallen bodies was swiftly stained crimson. The fact that they were still looking all around was proof that they didn't know their attacker's position. And they were all being taken down. The 4 people could only gaze in mute surprise at the arrow veins jutting from the hearts of the fallen. They had an ally with a bow in the area, and said ally was absolutely deadly with it. Nearly 10 foes had been eliminated in as many seconds, and each had been pierced through the heart with a single shot. That didn't seem the sort of thing any ordinary, or respectable, human could do. The snowstorm still raged. The second the mountain folk had begun to fall, Cray had shouted, "Hit the deck," and lain flat on the ground. And though he wasn't the kind of man to flinch from any foe, he had no way of knowing how accurate the mysterious shooter was. "Where are they?" Cray inquired, though even he didn't know whom he expected to answer. "Dad," Laurie cried out. As if he had been struck dumb for precisely this reason, the boy got up and looked all around, unable to contain his explosion of emotion. "Dad? Is that you, Dad?" Before the kid could start jumping about, the guardsman pushed him back to the ground, and he too looked all around as he said, "Did you say it was your dad?" Dust's narrow eyes went wide. "Are you sure, Louis?" Vera asked as she crawled closer. I haven't heard much about your father. Was he a huntsman? That's right. It must be him. My father saved us. The boy was trying to get up again, as if he'd lost his mind, but Dusk kept one hand on him to hold him down. Simmer down. Does your dad have the kind of skill we saw just now? He does. Calm down, Dusk said, putting strength behind his arm. The Ree's body stiffened, and the pain cleared his head. That's not the work of a mortal man. Is your dad some kind of monster? No. The Ree had taken a few seconds to reply. Then something other than a human must have saved us. You know why? Moving only his head, Dusk looked at the doctor and the outlaw. Both shook their heads. Dusk said to the boy, I don't know either, and so it might be that the shooter wasn't necessarily out to help us. What then? At the boy's nervous query, Dusk gave him a friendly slap on one feeble shoulder. Maybe they wanted to keep all the food for themselves. I agree, Gray said, raising his right hand like a schoolboy, while Vera gave him a scathing look. It's too soon to say for sure. Perhaps they have some reason for not wanting us to see them. Cray snorted derisively. So, we've got ourselves a bashful little ally. If there were anyone like that around, we'd have long since caught wind of it. First off, how would they even survive up here on the mountain? The mountain folk get by, said Vera. Those clowns aren't even human anymore. Snow hares and snow panthers I could see, but they eat bewilderers and beast shrooms, making them half monster themselves. And they eat human flesh, too. Human flesh. Oh, stop it. The doctor scolded him, no longer able to restrain herself, and the outlaw actually buttoned his lip. Have they gone? Telling the boy to stay put, Dust got to his feet. Cray was still lying flat against the ground. That was close. Do you suppose they ran off? Whoever it was killed off all the white suits would have known where we were from the very start. If they'd wanted to, they'd have punched every one of our tickets. Good point, Vera conceded, grabbing the nearby Cray by the elbow. What do you want? Get on your feet already. A man's supposed to look out for women and children, isn't he? For your information, I'm an outlaw, Cray said, baring his teeth. My main gig is bodyguarding, but I do some killing on the side. I've got 30 counts against me, and I'm proud of it. If they ever catch me, I'm looking at the death penalty 12 times minimum. A person in my line doesn't look out for women and children. Nothing on this mountain has anything to do with your line. There are just men, women, and children up here. And if you're a man, you can't just leave the weak to fend for themselves, can you? I don't want to hear weak this and weak that out of you. If there's one thing I hate, it's skirts like you who are all high and mighty when it suits you, and then turn around and play the weak little female card. That's a woman's prerogative. Stop your complaining. Stop your complaining. At any rate, we're safe now. Let's set up the tents. Dust's words spelled the end of their quarrel. The snow blew wildly into their faces, now that the living dead had been picked off. A new spectre of death had come to spread its wings. Page break indicated by a small cross. The refuge hadn't proved of any use. Although Lilia had hit the switch as soon as she jumped, the refuge had been assailed by a ferocious crossbreeze that tore it from her grasp. On top of that, though she'd landed feet first in a heavy covering of snow, her right foot had been sprained by the rocks below, and didn't look like she'd be able to stand any time soon. Even here at the bottom of the ravine, the wind and snow blew just as hard. Lilia wasn't rattled. Her winter coat was still in good shape, and though the refuge had eluded her, once she tracked it down, she'd have sufficient food and medicine. She'd even be able to perform a simple medical procedure. Guess I'll see how well I handle the cold until I get this foot fixed. She looked up. The sky was already tinged with darkness, allowing her to make out nothing save the whiteness of snow. Suddenly a chill ran down her spine. Not fear, but a physical phenomenon that was enough to invite it. She was cold. Her eyes raced to the control panel on the left breast of her coat. The temperature read 0. She couldn't be sure, but she thought the shock of the fall had probably caused the device to malfunction. Lilia looked up at the sky again and clucked her tongue. Mark my words, I'll be relaxing with a long, hot shower before this is over. Now the refuge was her only hope. Taking the longsword from her back to support her weight, she barely managed to get up on her left leg. Even advancing a single step sent acute pain shooting through her right foot. Apparently, she'd broken bones in her ankle and knee. Still, Lilia had to grin. That'll clear away the cobwebs. In the snow, her body heat would soon be drained and sleepiness would beset her. When that happened, pain would undoubtedly be the best way to keep herself awake. But things didn't go at all as planned. Search as she might, she was unable to locate the refuge. Lilia, covered in white, spent an hour in her fruitless quest, and now she collapsed in the snow. Not done yet. At this rate, there was no advantage in her having abandoned the rest of the group. Every time she moved her right foot, a dull pain spread through her, making it harder to get around. Her consciousness suddenly started slipping away. Quickly raising the sword she was using as a cane, she drew the blade from its sheath and set it down to her right. She took a backhanded hold of the hilt with her right hand. Then, rolling up her left sleeve, she bit into her bicep. About 10 seconds later, she felt something warm spreading through her mouth, which had been frozen. Lilia sucked down her own rapidly cooling blood, and the blood that poured out without end seemed hot. While she was focused solely on drinking, something moved down by her feet. Her eyes shifted to catch it. It was the still-compacted refuge. Before she could feel joy at this, Lilia was chilled in another sense. There was someone just beyond the refuge. Someone whose very presence could keep even a huntress honed by countless battles from moving a muscle. That must be delicious. What could be better than your own blood? The low, sullen voice seemed to ricochet off the snow and the wind. Yeah, it's really good, Lilia replied in her mind, pinning all her hopes on her right hand. Taking the blade she'd set down to her right, she made a backhanded slash. It mowed right through her opponent's torso, but the movement stopped at his waist. Although it came to rest softly, the blade wouldn't move, as if it were embedded in a rock wall that seemed to boast an infinite mass. You nicked my finger a little, the voice said. It took some time for her to comprehend what that meant. You stopped my sword with your fingers. Quite impressive talent you have, as child's play goes, that is. The voice continued. Disturbingly, it didn't seem to be mocking her. It continued. That settles it. Before Lilia could even frame the question, settles what? A black figure filled her entire field of view. Chapter 5, End.